Hi, my name is Zack, and I want to share with you one of my favorite Bible stories and how I think it applies to life as a high school kid in particular. So my favorite story is the story of Gideon. It's found Judges 6 to 8, but I think the best part's in Judges 7, just because that's when all the fighting happens, and I'm a guy, so what can you do? Anyways, a quick rundown for those of you who haven't heard of the story. Basically, it follows this guy named Gideon, and the story starts off in a time when the Israelites weren't really doing too hot. They were basically being bullied every single day by the Midianites, because up until the point in the story, before it takes place, they'd been sinning and not really following God. They were worshiping this guy by the name of Baal, and so God gave them into the hands of their enemies to kind of teach them a lesson and hope they'd kind of shape up. So eventually, they get the message, and God goes and talks to Gideon, and basically tells him that he's going to use Gideon to overthrow the Midianites and give back the power to the Israelites. So there's a little bit of confusion where Gideon, he's not sure if it's actually God and some stuff, but what it comes down to is Gideon has to basically stand out of the crowd and take charge of a people who are scattered and they're gone into hiding, basically. God calls him, the mighty warrior. That's one of the names that's really classic in the Bible. I believe a couple years ago at Epoch, we did a whole section on God's nickname for us. And but Gideon was really not too sure at first what was going on. He says that my clan is the weakest in Manasseh and I'm the least in my family. He's not a popular guy. He's probably, just one step above a slave. So he doesn't think that he's going to be the one to take control of this entire army. And so he's really skeptical at first, but eventually he finds his courage and the story goes on. Basically, he gets about, I think it's 30,000 soldiers or men together that are collected, and these are just farmers with old, dusty swords they pull out once every generation. They're not fighters, but they all get together and they're all in this camp. But God looks at them and he says, "Okay, you have about 30,000 guys, but that's too many, because God knows that if we have enough people fighting, then we're going to think that it's by our own strength that we're overcoming our enemies." So he tells him that anyone who's scared in the entire army, anyone who even has a single thought of fear, they can just go home. Free pass, don't have to fight. So Gideon goes and does that, and after everyone leaves, he only has 10,000 guys that say they're not scared. God says that's still too much. So then he tells Gideon to tell everyone that they got to go down to the river and they got to drink some water. And those who just plunge their face in and chug it, they can go home. But those who cup the water with their hands, they can stay and fight. So only 300 stay and use their hands to get water. The rest go home, and so it's just 300 guys in Gideon. And they're just chilling in a camp, and they're supposed to take out this huge army, and of course it's the same thing. The odds are against them. And it's a lot like that movie 300 if you've seen it. If you haven't, don't watch it. It's really gory, but it's basically about 300 soldiers who take on this ridiculous army, and it's a good movie, lots of fight scenes and stuff, but that's literally what goes on in the Bible. And they go down and they're taking a peek at the camp they're supposed to raid. All the Midianites are camped in one valley. And it says that their camels could be no more counted than the sand on the seashore. So if you can imagine the biggest valley you've ever seen, and you can't even see the dirt because there's so many enemies there. So they're getting pretty scared, but they go through a couple more tests basically and decide that, they're going to do it. And so Gideon divides his men up into 3 groups of guys. They surround the camp and they all charge and they make lots of noise and confuse the enemy. And long story short, they eventually take out the Midianites and restore the Israeli power, basically. So when I first heard that story, I thought, it's awesome, it's a cool story, it's fun to read and everything. But when you start looking at it, you can see how it actually applies to our lives in a really meaningful way. Just for me personally, in high school, it's not all bad. There's lots of good that comes from it, but every day you're thrust with images of sex and drugs and alcohol and just all these bad things that can lead you down really bad paths. And you got to look out for stuff like that. A good part of that is just being street smart and, not wanting the free candy that guy wants to give you. But, if you can stay strong with God, then he can really lead you out of those situations and not only, keep you away from the danger, but put you into really, really good places. Gideon started off as the least in his clan, the least in his entire country, basically. He just got picked on probably every day because he sucked at everything. but all he did was just stay true to God and just not give in to any of the other temptations that life was throwing at him. And because of that God used him for a really, really cool thing. I mean, he ends up as the king of the entire nation of Israel at the end of the story. His entire family just gets booted up, and he just becomes kind of like a powerful man. And it's not that he's abusing that or anything, but it's just, it's cool. And so I'd like to encourage everyone, like, if you are in a situation at school, at home, or in the workplace where, like, you are being thrust, with temptations for everything, be it alcohol, drugs, sex, no matter what it is, as long as you can stay strong in God, I mean, he'll lead you to places that are even better. Because there's this quote, and I forget who says it, but, like, 40 years ago, I mean, if you wanted to have these temptations, like, if you wanted to go have sex or do drugs, you had to go and find it, but nowadays, I mean, I can get anything I need, like any of that stuff. It's all on my phone, basically. And you got to be really careful, and that's why now is more than ever a time to lean into God and just trust him with everything. And if you can manage to just put everything you have into God and just lean into him and read your Bible and study as much as you can, then he will take you to places that you can't even imagine, and it's awesome.